All right, we are now recording. Good morning. Welcome to the Skype session. I am sitting here with Leo Lowy. Leo is the director of printer software here at Zebra. In the past couple of weeks, Leo and I actually shot a couple of videos that I've shared with partners. One of them was on LinkOS and why did Zebra create it. The other one was about exploring printer management. And at the end of that printer management video, we actually teased a simple 7-question outline, which will help you as a partner guide your customers to choosing the right printer management solution based on their needs. Leo, how are you doing this morning?
Great, and thanks for the time to cover this today.
Oh my gosh, thank you. I think this is good for partners.
I hope so. This is a question we get a lot. What I hear from people all the time is, wow, Zebra, you guys got a bunch of different visibility solutions around devices, and particularly from a printer-oriented person myself, around printers. How do I choose which is the right one? And how do I make sure that I'm making the investment in the tool that's really going to pay off for myself and my organization? There's a lot of use cases out there, and the current slide right here kind of looks at this. These are stories we hear from customers and almost direct quotes, right? People look at this and they say, hey, I want a quick way to look at device status, right? Just a quick look at something and quickly see there's an issue going on, and I'm going to send somebody to go out and fix it. Or they want to look at device statuses, and then they want to use a remote tool. Particularly important in those cases where you've got printers, devices that are geographically spread out all over the place, right? You don't want to have to deploy what we call guy with cart, right? That's not a very efficient solution in some circumstances. Some folks don't really want a dashboard. It's an interesting thing. If you look at the two audiences that we largely end up talking to, it's traditionally going to be operations, or it can be the IT folks, and they have different ways of looking at things. Frequently, the folks in ops do want a dashboard. They want that quick look to say, hey, everything, the board is green, life is good, or the board is mostly green with a couple of yellows, or oh my gosh, there's a red one over there, let's go deal with that one. But digging down inside and doing the troubleshooting is maybe not what they're focused on. Where on the IT side, that's really what they want, right? They want to get into the meat of the matter and actually deal with an issue. And sometimes you get people who bounce back and forth, right? Their job, they have multiple hats. And so sometimes they're ops and sometimes they're IT. So they're looking across these dimensions of real-time visibility and predictive visibility and on-site and remote. Really depends on their role and who gets involved when something needs to be worked on. So clicking in a little bit more, when you look at the solutions at Zebra, again, you'll see there's a wide variety of solutions, and I like to just divide them right off into two buckets: the view and manage and the view only. Right, that makes it a little bit simpler right from the start. So we'll start with the view only. That's on the right-hand side of the slide. This is the asset visibility service. This is the ability for the products to connect to a cloud-based site, and that's important that it is a cloud-based site, and at least currently not an on-prem offering. So it's a cloud-based site where the devices are attaching to. We're gathering data on those devices, and we're doing predictive analytics on those devices. So in the case of printers, we're saying, wow, it's been this much time you've been using that printer with this much amount of usage. It's probably time to think about cleaning the head or replacing the platen or maybe replacing the head. Over on the view and manage side, that's where things are more complex, obviously. You've got a variety of tools. You've got the operational visibility service, commonly known as OVS. You've got SODI, you've got AirWatch, our connectors that go into SODI and AirWatch. You've got our legacy Profile Manager product that's been around for a while, the newer product, Profile Manager Enterprise. You've got Bridge, right? So you've got this variety of view and manage tools that you can use, and the question is obviously is which one or ones, that's important, are right for me. And then you've got the secondary kicker in that sometimes the right answer is more than one tool. So I give the example here. You might have a ops person who loves AVS, who says, man, I love being able to look at that screen every day and just look for any kind of issues that are up and coming and know predictively what's happening, but I don't actually work on things. But then right next to that person, you might have someone who is an IT person who actually does work on issues, who needs to be able to get in that granular relationship with the product. So my first piece of advice, if I'm not making it obvious, is know what the person or person's role is when there's a problem with the products or when there's an issue with the product. Know what their role is in relation to that product. Then the second question is know what happens or what the consequence is when things start to go down and they start to have a problem. Once you understand those two facts on their own, you're going to be a lot closer to knowing which is the right solution. Now, there are a lot of solutions, as we mentioned before, and getting to the right one can be pretty difficult. And as I said, sometimes there's not one solution, sometimes there's two solutions. So we've derived these 7 questions that we're going to look at for a couple minutes here as a way to understand all of these factors that are coming in, these ideas around IT governance, the role that the person is playing, again, the ops or the IT, what kind of devices are you looking at, what's the consequence or the effect when there's a problem on a product. We kind of boil that all down into these 7 questions. Now, before we look at the questions, I'll make a couple of comments about them. It doesn't matter what order you ask them in. It literally does not matter. It matters that you ask them all. It matters that you keep an open mind while you're asking them, and don't try and jump right to solution. As solution builders, everyone listening to this, we all want to get to that answer and get right to the solution and help the user very quickly, but this is one of those times when you got to kind of hang back a little bit and keep an open mind and make it through the 7 questions, and then you will almost every time at the end of that process you'll know, okay, I know where to take this person next. I know what is the right solution for them. All right, so 7 questions. Here they are. So again, it's a little bit printer oriented since I'm from the printer business unit, but we'll walk through them here. So, and we'll actually do them from we'll do them from number 1 down in this case. So the first question is, which printer models do you need to manage? Now this has to do with what solutions can be managed by which, or which printers can be managed by which solutions. So for example, ZebraLink printers, the older printers, can't be managed by AirWatch, SODI, Profile Manager, OBS, ABS. So if you had somebody who had a non-LinkOS printer, a ZebraLink printer, then right away you've gone through your first sort of subtraction in the system. Right away you know that person is not someone that's appropriate for some of the solutions, and something like ZebraNet Bridge or Mirror might be right for them. Now, I will tell you, you're going to find very few of these people today. What you're going to find more often than not is you've got a mixed population where they've got some of the older printers and they've got some of the newer printers. And obviously, in most cases, folks are looking at the future and not necessarily looking at the past. They really want to move towards the newer product in most cases. My advice is look at a way that you can have a rational transition plan for users when you run into this mixed population, right? If it sounds like I'm spending a lot of time on one question, it's because it's a really key question for a lot of users, right? They're looking at, in some cases, a whole bunch of printers that have been around for a long time. They're still functional. They're like, well, why would I get rid of these? Well, the conversation is really got to be more, what are you getting out of them? Are you getting everything you could get out of the newer printers? And do we want to build a transition plan to go from the older printers to the newer printers? I'm not saying go forklift them out of your facility today, but think about what's your conversion plan for those in the road, down the road. It's not by accident that we have a product called ZebraNet Bridge. And it is literally, sorry, this is going to be a bad pun, a bridge. It is a good piece of software, been around for a long time. It can manage the ZebraLink printers, though not nearly with the level of sophistication and independence of operating system and scalability that something like, let's say, Profile Manager or Enterprise can. But it's a good functional tool for a legacy printer, because what we don't want to do is have to say to a user, well, thanks for buying our printer that we made and intentionally designed to last for a really long time. You can't manage it. We really want to be more in a position where we say, thanks for buying that printer. We can give you a level of management with it, and then we can talk about how to move to a newer printer down the road. Okay, next question. How are the printers connected? Okay, this one sounds like I'm batting softball here, but this one actually is is important today and more important within just a few weeks in the time when you'll be hearing this recording. So traditionally, when we talk about remote management, we're always talking about devices that are on some kind of network connection, WLAN or Ethernet. Normally, locally connected devices, particularly things like Bluetooth, can only be managed from a device that they're connected to. That's changing. By the time that this recording comes out, we will have released what's called Bluetooth management, where we will be able to manage a range of the LinkOS printers from an Android device.
I wondered if you were going to mention that.
Yeah. And
you gave me a sneak preview a few weeks ago, but okay.
Yeah, it's kind of we kind of hinted at it when we did the first recording. So by the time this one comes out, it'll be live and real. And so it's a really good question to ask users. People will tend to think, well, if it's Bluetooth, it can't be managed. That's changing, right? There's going to be an option out there for them to do that. Now, that solution will be built around an Android device acting as the connection point for the printer up to, let's say, Profile Manager Enterprise or up to SOTI. But again, there's some flexibility here. Okay, who does the management work? Now, as I said before, typically that's going to be IT that does it, and Ops is going to want a dashboard, something like OVS. Just remember that sometimes people are living in, they wear multiple hats and they move back and forth. And sort of the other corollary question underneath that one is understand what it means to people when there is downtime and what they're really focused on. So, for example, some customers will be very, very focused on battery. Some customers will be very, very focused on odometers and what the odometers can tell them about things like printhead cleaning. So it's a good time to dig in a little bit and see what they are trying to do and who is involved with that work. This next question is such a huge issue that we want to make sure that we highlight it. Does the user need to update WLAN security certificates frequently? If you had asked about this, honestly, Mark, 3 years ago, we probably wouldn't have put such a focus on this. But at this point, it's become so important to so many of our customers that they have relatively easy ways to update certificates on printers for wireless securities. This is where Profile Manager, and particularly Profile Manager Enterprise, make kind of stand out and make a big difference and make it easier to do that. So the real key here is, are they using certificates, and how often are they converting those certificates? Important that you ask them how often. You will find that some customers are doing this maybe once a year, but we've also got some customers that are doing it every 3 months. And sort of think about the idea that they're changing a certificate that's individualized to each device across an enterprise. If they've got 3,000 devices, they've got to generate and distribute 3,000 individual certs. You want to make that as easy as possible, because the reason that they're changing that certificate is to improve their security. So the longer the old certs are around, the longer the older security system that they're trying to get rid of is in place.
How would that happen in OVS with, let's say, an MDM like?
Yeah, great question. So
Mobi Control.
So Profile Manager Enterprise, again, particularly Profile Manager Enterprise, has a convenient system for taking what's called a P12 package and sending it to the printer. That's a convenient way to package certificates. Now, you can update certificates from things like SOTI and AirWatch, but they don't have the same kind of P12 package consumption and distribution model, so you have to resort to an older, more manual process. And that's where it gets into a little bit of a, you look at their situation and say, what's a better solution for them. So this next question actually kind of touches that a little bit. Let's say you had somebody who was going to change those certs once a year, and they wanted to use SOTI, and they wanted to use SOTI because they're managing both printers and mobile computers. Well, to be candid, it wouldn't make a lot of sense to tell them you should be using Profile Manager Enterprise, because they've already invested in SOTI. They're using it for managing multiple devices, and they're not actually encountering the certificate rotation all that often. So the fact that they'd have to do a more manual process in SOTI would probably not be a big hassle for them. and they're getting the advantage of managing all their devices via SODI, right? So in that case, the balance tips towards something like SODI or AirWatch and away from Profile Manager.
That's what I was thinking. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no, and that's a great question, and that's the kind of sort of like mental gymnastics, I guess, that you want to be doing, and that's why we say it's really important to ask all of the questions, because you saw how that's kind of a balance of several factors together to get to the conclusion of what's the right solution. Okay, so number 5, are you managing just printers or printers and other devices? The big traditional MDM systems like AirWatch and SODI and Wavelength, they're great systems, right? They do a great job, and I always say if somebody is heavily heavy user of, let's say, a SODI or an AirWatch or a Wavelength, and they're invested in the system, that really tips the scales towards staying with that kind of system. It is very expensive, time-consuming, and of questionable benefit to try and get somebody to drop a SODI or an AirWatch. What it takes to get into using those packages and those platforms is so much work that you're kind of fighting the wind if you're trying to get somebody to drop a SODI in favor of one of the other platforms or vice versa, right? It's just really important to know how they're working today and what headwinds you might face if you're trying to get them to change. So what needs to be managed? In most cases with printers, you're going to find it will be really 3 things that users want. Most of the systems can handle doing printer updates or firmware updates or OS updates, plus setting updates, or downloading objects to the printers. Now, when you look at this from the perspective of ease of use, something like Profile Manager Enterprise makes this very easy to do. It has a lot of convenience features inside of it for doing things like updating settings and downloading objects. But again, if the customer was not doing that on a regular basis, you kind of have to ask, maybe Profile Manager Enterprise is not the right tool for them, right? And let's say they were using SODI. Okay, might be better to have them stick with SODI. Let's now we're further down the list here, so let's give a really good example. You run into a customer who has ZebraLink printers, right? That was up in question 1. They've got Zebra mobile computers, and they're managing the devices via, let's say, SODI, right? Could be AirWatch, could be Wavelength, but let's just say SODI for this example. That customer, trying to move them to Profile Manager, unless there's some compelling reason to do it, I personally wouldn't do it. But they've got these ZebraLink printers, so it's great to have a story and to say to that customer, hey, we're going to manage your legacy printers via Bridge while we work on transitioning you to LinkOS printers that you can then manage on SODI. You got a nice account management plan at that point. Okay, and then this last question, which I kind of touched on already, is which device management system do you use today? Really, again, moving people from one existing platform to another is really challenging, unless, and here's the kicker, unless they hate the one they're using, right? And I've actually had this in the field a number of times where people say, we're using brand X, we can't stand it, please get us out of it. And then the door is open, and you can have a conversation about the relative merits of all the other solutions that are out there. So again, these 7 questions, you can see what happens here. I hope it's evident. You're driving a conversation around needs, around who does the work, around what are the trade-offs of the various solutions that are out there. So at the end, you end up with 1 or 2 solid recommendations. So a couple other slides here real quickly. So you've got a nice comparison in this deck that shows you the various things that you can do with all of the solutions that are out there. Hopefully this is useful and gives people a sense of what's possible and what's out there. I think that this is probably the best way to look at it. And I'm actually going to stop on this slide and see if you have any questions.
No, but I definitely see the good stuff here. One of the things that you mentioned in a previous video was the fact that a lot of the existing printer management options, like for instance, Wavelengths, Avalanche, SODI's, Mobi Control, and the AirWatch solution, they may have about 50-ish different printer criteria that they're searching for or able to report on, where Profile Manager Enterprise has, I think you said 300. Was that correct? 300-ish? Is that correct?
Yep, that's correct.
Yeah.
Yep.
So obviously all the dots on the right-hand side of the screen, that doesn't equal 300, but it just goes to show you that it's a pretty deep list.
It's a pretty deep list, and actually I'll bring that that slide up real quickly here, just because it's kind of educational to look at. I'll bring that PDF up real quickly here. So bear with me for 1 second. So this is the content that you're talking about. Left-hand side is what's covered by AirWatch, then what's covered by SODI, what's covered by Profile Manager Enterprise, and recently, I think you've not seen this one before, we added what's covered by Wavelink. And you can see what happens here as you go down the list. Wavelink drops off pretty early in terms of coverage, and then SODI and AirWatch drop off in terms of coverage, and Profile Manager just sort of goes on and on and on with the large number of settings that we are covering in that product. And the reason for that really is, we made Profile Manager, we made it just for printers, and so we had the luxury of covering a lot of stuff in it. Again, my job at Zebra is managing solutions around AirWatch and SODI and Wavelink and Bridge and Mirror and Profile Manager Enterprise, and I manage the software that lets the printers connect into AVS as well. So I try and be as neutral as possible in this and say, let's follow the following rule is the one I always try and follow. It doesn't matter so much to me which one of these solutions people have. It matters that they have a solution. Because when there are issues with printers that need to be addressed, security updates, OS updates, that can be dislocating in terms of production processes. And for me, what I really try and very hard to avoid is the guy with the cart rolling around a facility manually updating everything. Much better to have a remote management system, much better way to keep things up and running.
Well, all this is really good. I definitely appreciate the time that you spent today. The list of 7 questions. At first, I was thinking we just kind of review the 7 questions, but you actually went into some description and some detail as to the background for behind each of the 7 questions. So I think that's going to help the partners that take the time to watch the full video, because there's a lot of good content here. And again, there's been a lot of gray area and a lot of confusion, up until now. And I've had partners ask those questions, and truthfully, I learned some just watching you here today again. So.
Well, good. I hope it's useful. And then, I for those of us, the folks at Zebra that work on this stuff, we know this is a tough topic because there's just so many solutions and so many choices out there. I guess our message is that we're trying to make everyone sort of keep in mind is there is a solution for pretty much every customer that's out there. It might be one product, it might be a blend of a couple of products, but in the end, it's best that people have some kind of solution, whatever it is, even if it's something like the free version of Bridge to do a limited amount of management on, because at the end of the day, you're buying the printer and the mobile computer to run your business. That's your real focus, is your business, right? Not necessarily the labels and not necessarily the information, but wanting to just run your business. And so we want to make it really easy to do that, and make it so that you're not really overly concerned with how am I going to manage these devices out in my field. I'll give a good example and kind of end on this one. We've got one account that we have worked with several times. They have literally 900 locations. It's a retail account. They have several devices in every of those locations, but what they don't have is any ops or IT people. It's a retail environment, so you don't see an IT person.
They're not in stores, right?
Yeah, exactly. And the ops people are typically not in the store either, right? The stores are just far flung, across a large geographical region, right? Maybe across an entire country or a couple of countries. And in those cases, whenever there is a need to do an update or anything, the one thing you don't want to do is say, well, we're all going to get in trucks and drive around and do the updates ourselves, right? You want to have some remote automated way to do it. This is way more efficient and way more drives a lot more customer satisfaction to use remote methods.
Yeah, and just to wrap things up, I know your example was a retail example that you just gave. However, there's a lot of DC production type facilities who they may have a IT or ops liaison person, but may not be their full-time job to be able to. They wouldn't have the time to go out and touch every single device. So to provide, at least not easily, but to provide a management way of doing it, so it's as hands-off as possible. Excellent.
Exactly.
Leo, thanks so much for your time.